Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M. S. Pierce. Ukraine War news update for the 11th of February 2024. This concerns, I guess this is a second one in this 24-hour period. I don't know, I lose track. And this one will concern only military aid, military equipment. I'm going to start with Norway wanting to provide Ukraine with an additional 10 NASAMS air defense systems. These are excellent, expensive co-production between Norway and US, and are very well received. That's according to the Defense Ministry. I don't know what the time frame is on this. Someone says launchers are not systems, so that could be a little bit of a difference there. But nonetheless, still would be really well received by the Ukrainians. So hopefully that can happen. There is a bit of a backlog, or there's some issue with manufacturing of these because Canada has paid for one. It paid for one a long time ago to come from the US, and it's still not arrived yet. Still, I don't know. So there's a log jam in the manufacturing process in the States or something. So, it would be great if this was able to be expedited. Right. Apparently, according to Edward Hunter Christie here, it is Joe Biden who's preventing Germany from sending Taurus. So, well, actually, not according to Edward Christie. It's actually Kiesewetter, who is an opposition parliamentarian in Germany. So it's interesting coming from him. He has openly called for Taurus to be delivered. Scholz has to get the green light from Joe Biden in Washington to deliver the cruise missiles, according to this German source. Separately, the Merkur.du. Separately, Kiesewetter also called for, quote, Russian military facilities and headquarters. They must be destroyed. We must do everything to enable Ukraine to destroy not only oil refineries in Russia, but ministries and command posts. I think that is very interesting rhetoric from a prominent German politician. Uh, Christie here says, please note my addendum to the Taurus issue based on more exact quote from Mr. Kiesewetter. It would seem to be once again a reluctance by Scholz to move ahead of the US on any particular capability to Ukraine for political strategic reasons. So he's sort of updated the idea that it's definitely Joe Biden holding it back, which is, and here's a translation. So, what do you expect from the Chancellor's visit to the US? I expect that he will give a wake up call to the Senate and the House of Representatives, and that because he never decides himself, he will finally be given the green light to be able to deliver Taurus cruise missiles. So, this sounds more like the tank situation in January 2023. So, it's not like Joe Biden is saying, you need to stop giving, you can't give the Taurus missile. It's a case of Joe Biden saying, right, we're going to deliver something else. And that in itself will give the green light to Olaf Scholz. So it's still with Olaf Scholz. It is a later understanding of this. There were other allies moving ahead of Germany. That's in terms of the tanks, where Scholz did not need the US to do anything, but Scholz invented a decision-making rule according to which Germany must act in lockstep, specifically with the US. In other words, Scholz doesn't care that France, the UK, and other European allies are leading on something. He will not emulate them. He will only emulate the US, and he will slice it down that way for every type of weapon. The notion then that he can't decide, whereas the UK and France can, would boil down to him wanting the White House to give some kind of cover to the decision. If it's the same political logic we saw with the land systems, then it's a purely political reasoning behind an invented political criteria, or based on an invented political criteria about how Germany should appear as an ally compared to the US and in the eyes of Russia, as a way of lowering theoretical threats of Russian escalation or revenge against Germany, while also trying to bind America to Germany's risk taking by binding it on every German decision. Interesting analysis there. So I personally think that sounds a lot more likely. I mean, he has been over with Biden in the White House in Washington, where he's been primarily, it seems, discussing US aid to Ukraine. The visit came as a bill containing $60 billion in aid for Ukraine has inched forward in the Senate after months of delays. It's so damned important. And next, we have, according to American officials, without replenishment of Ukraine's air defense system missiles, it will only last until next month. So, this is the idea that they're running low on critical missiles, and if they don't get more aid from the US, they will be in serious trouble. Now, there's been an interesting bit of analysis done by Turchny, where they looked at the fragments of missiles that took down supposedly the Il-76 cargo plane inside Russia that the Russians claim uh, had POWs on board. That doesn't seem to be the case at all. Anyway, those fragments appear to be from the oldest, I think, 1986 Patriot missile. uh, Supposedly, they have been destroyed previously. Well, if they're finding their way to Ukraine, it could be that there's some kind of backdoor arrangement involving the EDA, so the Excess Defense Act, where US can get rid of obsolete stuff at really cheap prices to Ukraine. I don't know that is speculation. There's a bit of analysis by Touching. You can go and check that out, but it could be that is a way of the US getting equipment, air defense, really needed air defense equipment to, well, not so much equipment, but ammunition to Ukraine. Then in the Atlantic, there's an article that says if the United States does not step back in with aid, Russia could eventually win this war. Tom Nichols says that, and I'd agree with that. I mean, I think win is probably a strong word, but I think it would stop Ukraine from winning themselves. It would just stymie their chances. The peace of the world itself could rest on what Congress does or does not do next. I completely agree. I'm really fed up with this situation in Congress. Now, I'm also flabbergasted that this has been said, and it's also just empirically wrong. So, if you are still a fan of Trump, honestly, uh, and also find aid to Ukraine super important, and whole Ukraine uh, situation massively important, then I don't know. I don't know how you can be a big fan of Trump.
They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Couple of things that are highly depressing here that people are clapping that like that's something that gets his audience enthused. He's basically saying that Russia can do whatever the hell they want. He's not going to come and help Europe if they don't pay their bills. He doesn't seem to understand that Europe has paid more as a percentage of GDP to Ukraine, virtually every country in Europe, than the US. He doesn't understand that over 11 countries are paying over the 2% threshold. Now, that's still not enough, but he's tarring the entirety of Europe with one very faulty brush. And there are nations like Poland pays more than the US um, uh, on defense as a percentage of GDP. So his idea that Europe's not paying their bills, that NATO is entirely being funded by the US in some kind of way, or at least the criteria is only being met by the US of spending 2% on defense, 2% of GDP on defense, is just uh, he's just wrong, right? He's just wrong and out of date, and this is creating a scenario where people are applauding him for saying stuff like this. And it's just essentially disinformation. There are now so many people across the socials, not just that. There's mainstream media articles going to town on what Trump said at this rally. This is not cool at all. This is absolutely uh, dangerous. As the Atlantic says here, Donald Trump, the 45th president of the US and the presumptive Republican nominee, said earlier today that he would side with Russia against NATO and encourage Russian President Vladimir Putin to brutalize our allies. Not so long ago, many Americans and especially most Republicans would have considered anyone supporting such a view to be a little more than a deranged and hateful anti American fanatic. Trump issued the unhinged threat while telling one of his Sir stories, a rhetorical device in which some unnamed interlocutor shows Trump great deference while humbly seeking his advice. It's interesting because I picked up on that myself. The idea that Sir, like some European leader would say Sir, blah blah blah, as in in deference to Trump is, again, just fanciful nonsense. He described a meeting ostensibly when he was in office in which he responded to an ally about NATO funding. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, "Well, sir, if you don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us?" I said, "You didn't pay, you're a delinquent." He said, "Yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills." Before we consider the sheer recklessness and the immorality of this statement, let us first accept that this exchange almost certainly never happened. And it goes on to give really decent analysis of this about Trump's propensity to not tell the truth, and then just he's just move on. Right. Now, Assistant Secretary of Defense Celeste. Oh, look, let's have some adults in the room. Celeste Wallander tells Clifford May that the US has provided Ukraine with long range strike capabilities in the form of drones and GLSDB, so ground launched small diameter bomb that gets fired out from HIMARS. It can go 150 kilometers. She also suggests that Ukraine has hit targets in Crimea with them. GLSDB, of course, was already known, but long range strike drones of some sort is not a capability that the US has previously disclosed as being provided to Ukraine. That's an interesting admission. I don't. Is it true? Like what's she referring to? I don't know. The head of the defense ministry of the Netherlands, Kaiser Ollongren, called for increased military aid to Ukraine in the context of a full scale invasion of Russia. Now, there are some people in Europe who are getting well rhetorically behind Ukraine in a major way, and this is good news. It's important, however, to make sure that that turns from rhetoric into stuff. According to Ollengren, quote, when it comes to conventional weapons, training and spare parts, I believe that there should be no restrictions in supporting Ukraine. Indeed, here's another source, no reports, saying Dutch defense minister asserts that there will be no limit to military support for Ukraine, encompassing weapons training and spare parts. She emphasizes the importance of sustained assistance for Ukraine, noting the evolution in collaboration with other nations and industries reflecting on her tenure. Ollengren highlights that ongoing commitment to aid Ukraine, stating that since Russia's invasion in February 2022, the Netherlands has provided $2.63 billion in military support. Ollengren underscores that not only Ukraine, but also the security of the Netherlands is influenced by such support, as both are integral to the EU and NATO. Remember, Netherlands is a country of, is it 18 million people? I forget now. Some dark recess in my mind has thrown it up. Compared to the US with 300, I don't know, 30 million plus. So when you look at the amount that countries give, you've got to remember their size relative to the US, if the US is your benchmark. Now, to return to Starlink and Starlink being used by the Russians inside the occupied territories of Ukraine, some people defended Musk to me yesterday, or at least kind of gave excuses to how this might be okay type thing, or might be explained. Right. Freudian slip there. Musk turned off Starlink in Crimea. He geofenced it so the Ukrainians couldn't use it, and he did it like that. It is available for use. There are availability charts that show you, maps that show you that you can use this in basically the whole of Zaporizhia, going into southern Donetsk and up in Luhansk, right? He can turn it off like that. He hasn't. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Russians are using it, and they are allowed to use it. He could geofence those areas like he did do to the Ukrainians that stopped them striking Russian ships and targets in Crimea. Yet he hasn't done that to the Russians. You know what side his bread is buttered, is all I'm saying. I don't think he's defensible at all, and I'm beyond. I'm beyond caring whether I annoy people by saying Musk is a tool, because he is, and he is, or at least in this context. And what he has said about Russia, just go and look at his words, and it tells you all you need to know. Finland will ship another 190 million euros of military aid to Ukraine. It brings the total value of support from them to 1.8 billion. Again, a very small country, comparatively speaking, in terms of population, but a country that, as mentioned before, the Baltics and the Nordic states are really, really trying to help out as much as possible. They know the threat that Russia is, and they're also a country that doesn't publicly state what aid they give to Ukraine. And talking about this, so super paper by Mina Alander says Phillips O'Brien about the serious defence preparation happening in the Nordic and Baltic states. Finland, for example, is doubling ammo production. All of Europe needs to be doing this with Trump on the horizon. So people still really worried about Trump. I heard some rumours yesterday, and I'd love my particularly American viewers to comment on this because I don't know if it's true, and I'm in a different country than I normally am, and I'm out of my zone of sources. But I heard that in light of Biden's mental situation, maybe just his age, and maybe also just general favorability ratings, that um, Michelle Obama might well be running and might just take over the reins. And you'd have a youngish black woman running that could enthuse the black vote, but also really enthuse Democrats in general across the political spectrum of Democrats, would have a probably quite a good appeal for independents as well. And that would totally take the rug out from under people who are talking about Biden not being capable in terms of age and so on and so forth. Some of those arguments coming from you people across the spectrum, from both Trump supporters and Republicans through to Democrats. Let me know if those rumors have any truth to them. Not necessarily truth, you might not know, but are these bona fide rumors that I'm hearing? I'd love to know that. And I think that would be a super clever move, by the way, if that happened. I think it would be absolutely bang on and exactly what the Democrats would need. I'm just worried. Like, I'm not so worried about. I am worried about Democrats versus Republicans in my general political kind of thinking. I'm in Ukraine here. I can see the effects of not having aid. Like at the moment, I'm so one tracked that the American election is just about Ukraine. For me, as a British person, obviously, you Americans, you're going to have many different political desires and ideas as to who should be president. But for me, I'm just thinking Ukraine at the moment. And as far as I'm concerned, Trump would be the single worst option. The first shots of a new first person view kamikaze drone called a Dart on the left bank of Dnipro here. The drone has a flight range of 30 kilometers and is equipped with a 3 kilogram warhead. Seems similar to the Lancet in a sense, that it's a propeller drone with front mounted propeller with what looking like a plane. I know the Lancet has those X wings, and I believe there is a parallel of that the Ukrainians are manufacturing. But here we are starting to see this drone variety hit the front lines. What do we have here? So David Arkamia, head of the ruling servant of the People Party in Ukraine's parliament, states that mobilization won't occur without demobilization, which is like putting an end point to people's contracts so that actually they can come out of the army. Um, Someone was telling me yesterday that in Ukraine it's changed such that if you serve for 3 years, you just get a nice extended holiday. It's a situation where Ukraine can't afford to demobilize in terms of they need boots on the ground. And it's again, it's another dilemma. It's like Zelensky's dilemma. If I mobilize 450,000 people, I lose, I don't know, maybe 900,000 people from the economy as people run away, as people, escape the country, as you're taking those people out of the economy, and things will break down within the economy, but within society at large. There are real challenges. If it was an easy thing to do and there were no ramifications, he would have mobilized like that. But there are so many other ramifications that's why he hasn't. And yet people say, well, you're an idiot for not doing that. Arguably, yes, if you look in this one small area of like winning the war, but then surely that's the only area to look. So anyway, whatever decision he makes is going to be problematic. This guy is saying, after discussing financial challenges and citing the EU's 50 billion euro program over 4 years and recent US support, he notes that the need for internal funding for new mobilization, emphasizing past training agreements with allies and unresolved border issues. USA for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is expected in the next 2 months. He says that it needs to talk about demobilization. He says, we have enough resources for 2 months, so we feel safe. 2 months, goodness. Okay. And finally, a Ukrainian F-16 fighter pilot or someone being trained has said that the F-16 has exceeded all expectations. The Air Force pilot, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the call sign Phantom, is one of the pilots being trained on the F-16 in the US and the EU. He says at first there was some difficulty since the F-16 is a modern aircraft that cannot be compared to Soviet models in service with Ukraine. Quote, our pilots are amazed. This aircraft simply exceeded all expectations. Even with the amount of information we have received, we see that this aircraft will help increase the capabilities of our aviation. Awesome stuff. And let's get that, well, not as quickly as possible. They need to be well trained and they need to be in a good position to be able to um, use them effectively. Anyway, that's enough for me on this one single topic. I'll have to leave geopolitical stuff until another time. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care. Speak soon. I need some breakfast.